Hey, welcome back. Stephen Young with Follow Me to Millions. Today I'm talking about the 3 worst properties I've ever seen and or purchased in my entire career. I have seen some doozies, but these 3, they still keep me up at night, and the fact that they even exist is mind-boggling to me. So if you're into real estate investing, if you're into value investing, so finding something that's undervalued or finding something that will bring you a quick turnaround on a flip or a rental property, most likely that property will not be what anybody wants. Okay, so these properties exist in every city around the world. They are not exclusive to me. They're not exclusive to any real estate investor. And you will be shocked how some people live. So these are the 3 worst properties I have ever seen. So the third, number 3, is it was a property. It was a foreclosure property. It was owned by a bank, and the bank refused to sell the property without a bank representative present and a lawyer present, and you had to sign a waiver to go into the property, which was a first for me at the time. I've had to do this several times since, but this is the first time. I was probably 27, I think I was, maybe 28. And I wasn't afraid to take on anything. I was so motivated. I still am, but at the time I didn't care what it was, but it was such a steal. This was downtown Toronto. It was a 3-story townhome. It was about 1,800 square feet or something like that. It was like a gorgeous Victorian brown brick townhome, row home, and I really wanted the property. So they originally went to market at $600,000. This going back like 10 years, so it's probably like worth $1.5 million today. At $600,000 was a neighboring property sold for $650. I think it sold for this neighbor, and then they were asking $600. So then they had dropped their price to about $400,000, and I gave an offer of $300,000, which they accepted, which I was like blown away by. I was like, this is going to be the game changer for me, right? This is going to be a big jump up on my real estate investing career. And so sure enough, they called me, and their lawyers called me and said, you got to meet us at the property. You have to sign these waivers, and you can look at the property. If you still want the property, then we'll move forward with the process. But we'll accept your price based on those conditions. So sure enough, I went down there, and I literally had to sign a waiver in front of the lawyer saying that if I were to hurt myself or to like contract like some kind of virus or something weird, or get rabies. There's all these weird things in this contract that I couldn't hold the bank liable. I was like, sure, whatever. And I said, before you can enter, you have to wear this hazmat suit. I was like, hazmat suit? So I literally had to put on a full suit, head to toe. And I went into the property, I signed the waivers, get in there. There is literally garbage from the floor to the ceiling. Like there's right up to the top. It's just garbage of like stuff and food and waste, and there's literally a hole in the top floor from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor. You could see from the ground floor right through to the ceiling, right to the sky. It was shocking to me what it was. I never seen anything like it at that point in time in my career. I've since seen several properties like that, but that was the worst one at that time in my career. There was literally like raccoons and squirrels and all sorts of stuff living in there. They didn't even care. It was like in the middle of winter. There was snow coming in the house from the outside. There's mold everywhere. It was revolting. So that one I actually passed on. So I did get it for the right price, but I was like, this is way too far gone for what I want to do. And I found other properties that were much easier to do and probably made more money on at the time. So that was the 3rd worst one. The 2nd worst one was one that I did buy, which was also one of the best opportunities I've ever come across in my entire career. It was downtown commercial properties, about 10,000 square feet. It was a 4-story, which is a mixed-use property. So there's like offices on the main floor. There was apartments above it. In the back half, they did a renovation, but part of the renovation, it didn't look as though it was formed well. Like the 2 halves of the house weren't really well connected. The elevations were different. But the worst part about this property was in the basement. They had dug out the basement, the area below the basement. So it was like a sub-basement. And the plan, I think, my understanding of it, was the guy was just trying to generate more square footage and put offices or a gym or something down there. But he did it all himself. So it's like I literally went down to there and it looked like a cave with like bricks holding up foundations from the basement, but they were like tilted and weren't done by general contractors properly. Certainly wasn't investigated by the city for permits or approval. There was a small pond down there which literally had animals living in it. I still to this day don't know what, but every time we'd go down there, there'd be splashes and like they'd be like scurrying away, and whatever was down there left at some point in time. So I actually did go through with that one. They had some structural issues, there was fire issues, tenant issues, all sorts of issues with the property, but it netted me almost $600,000 of profit in a few short months with none of my own money invested into it, and that was a good score. But it was also one of the scariest places I saw, because it literally could have fallen down at any moment in time. It was really that unsafe. The person I had sold it to, they were a developer, and they just tore the whole thing down. It's just just a piece of land right now. So the worst property I think I've ever seen, though, was a tax sale, a tax lien sale. If you don't know what those are, municipalities all across the world have people who don't pay their property taxes. And after some municipalities, it's 4 years, some is 1 year. But if you're in arrears on your property taxes, you can literally buy the home for what's just owing on the taxes to the city. Now, there's obviously, we're not going to get into training on that today. There's some more complications to it, but effectively, you can literally buy homes for like 10 cents on the dollar. So, sure enough, this property came up to auction. We had won the bid on it, and the owner had, I think it was 3 months to pay out the arrears before I took possession of the property. This is what we call the Cat House. It's a very famous house in Toronto. The gentleman lived outside even through the winter. And, Toronto's got not easy winters to live through. So he lived out there outside, because the inside you couldn't even get into the property. It was just full of stuff, ornaments, garbage, food. But what was most famous for was cats. It was literally called the Cat House. There was in excess of 50 cats living in the property, inside the property. So this gentleman was living outside on the porch, even through the winters, and the cats would live indoors. And the smell that came from this house, you could smell it down the street on certain ways when the wind blew. It was, you could literally smell like just cat animal stuff from like far away. And they had big issues, fire issues. The fire department was always called there. They feared that the house would collapse because there's so much stuff in it. Ultimately, I think his son paid the arrears, so I actually never got that property. But still to this day, the house still is there. He's since moved on, and I think his son has cleaned up some of it, but the cats still to this day, that was probably 6 or 7 years ago, the cats are still roaming around the neighborhood, and it's a very famous house. And if you ever buy Midtown Toronto, you can just Google the Cat House, and you can find it and go see for yourself. But that is that's the worst one I've ever seen and smelled, for sure. So that's my story for the day.